NASA 2022 equals Star Trek 1966. Today on episode 283 of Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming at you right from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47 and all things Trekland for some clarity and sanity and the big picture in all things Star Trek. Today, a big picture especially. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Tuesday. I'm back here at Trekland HQ. Yay. Hope everything is going well where you are this week, this Tuesday, this fine Tuesday. I know I'm breathing a little easier this week. And not just because the air quality is up to par. But I happened to spy a little news story, an actual news story this week. And before I get into it, just to say, welcome everybody. Lots is going on here in Trekland. Just a real quick reminder, we are still haggling over the date, but we're about to announce our surprise guest for our 7th anniversary open house for Portal 47. The one time a year we open the gates of Portal. Everything is free. We have a wonderful guest and give you a taste of what it's like every month with the Portales, a little bit of Ask Dr. Trek Roundtable, and then an hour or so, or maybe more. Last year, Mike McMahon gave us 2 hours live and recorded with a great Star Trek special guest. That's coming up probably now in December, but still holding off, okay? You will know. And you'll go to LarryNemecek.com. You can get in right now, LarryNemecek.com, and click on and reserve your seat because we're also going to have giveaways. I've got some DVDs and books to give away, which will be awesome. So today I want to talk about this story that came out. I saw it, Huffington Post ran it, but it's a NASA paper. NASA scientists present theory about why we haven't met other intelligent life, period. It's crushing, period. I knew at the instant I saw the headline what was going to go on with it. I'm surprised that it was a new report because I thought this is the kind of thing that had been talked about over the years. Maybe I'm thinking about scientists just randomly, professors, academics, pundits saying this. This has the imprimatur of an actual NASA white paper. This is the link that I'm talking about, and I'll even give it up here in the video. No, that's what I'm talking about because the basic premise is all intelligent life, they argue, has likely destroyed itself before reaching a sophisticated enough point in evolution to support such an encounter, getting off their own world, getting into space, traveling with enough technology, propulsion, warp drive, if you would, to be able to cross interstellar distances and meet us. It's not about whether we're boring or not. It's about whether they can hold it together to advance to the stage where interstellar flight is possible. Now, it's called the Great Filter Theory. In other words, life form civilizations filter out because they get to a certain point, and what do? In fact, that we've had civilizations that existed during the life. And look at Star Trek. Everybody from, I don't know, the Herc, go back through the Preservers, the Providers, go back through time immemorial and back through all the series, and you've got not so much the super aliens like the Q or the Metrons or Trelane's folks, but if they're not indeed Q also, but those ancient civilizations that, long ago, when we have their ruins, or they've left behind this marker, or they've left and something happened to them. Sometimes we hear even Sargon and Thalasis people are said to have killed themselves in a nuclear war. They became so advanced, but apparently they still had their Achilles heel. They had their flaw. They had their hubris and their ego. They had their competition, which, of course, A Return to Tomorrow lets us see that play out when the last 3 survivors are brought back to life, and one of them can't help but try to take down the other 2 still. That's really what's at the core of this paper, that there have been other civilizations, but they all destroyed themselves because before they could make contact with Earth. Maybe they had a war. Maybe they just couldn't deal with planetary pollution. Maybe they couldn't get over the tech hump. Maybe they couldn't get over the tech hump because they got to a certain point and couldn't get past that. Maybe they had their equivalent of the A-bomb and harnessed the knowledge, couldn't handle the responsibility of the power. In fact, the paper says The key to humanity successfully traversing such a universal filter, to humanity doing it, is identifying destructive tendencies, destructive attributes in ourselves and neutralizing them in advance, said an astrophysicist, not a sociologist, not a psychologist, but an astrophysicist. Jonathan Yang and his co-authors wrote in this paper that appeared online on October 23rd. So just the last 2 or 3 weeks. It hasn't been peer reviewed, but I saw this headline. I immediately knew what was going on because I thought, well, great, NASA, you're finally catching up with, I don't know, Gene Roddenberry, 1966. I knew vaguely this is the thing that Gene would say. Because look, Gene, after it was created to be an allegory, to be a metaphorical show to talk about adult problems, right? Human problems, he went into Star Trek thinking he's telling the stories from this angle as a TV producer who's been censored, wants to talk about what he wants to talk about. Not until he got into it midstream, I think he realized that the appeal of Star Trek that I think blindsided everybody was how much people were dying for some positivism on 2 levels. Number one, sci-fi on screen had been the lowest common denominator, bug-eyed monsters radiating, although they can be allegorical too, the dangers of atomic power in your giant insects and giant critters, but just the aliens that come to Earth to destroy and pillage. And yeah, even as sophisticatedly presented with CG as Independence Day, because aliens can be territorial and there can still be a competition of resources on a galactic scale, really, that marks what happened on Earth, the competition for resources. Then you have the competition for ideology, theology, ideology. Got to find something to fight about. If you expand that out to a global scale, well, yeah, we've got Klingons and Romulans and Cardassians and Borg. Oh my. There's competition for resources and power and et cetera, et cetera. But everybody has gotten to a scale where they have mastered warp drive and they know how not to jelly themselves against the wall of the ship when against a corridor book. We have internal dampeners. And we have artificial gravity, and we can take our resources along with us. And most of all, once we can create those resources on a molecular level, like replication, industrial or personal, now gold is as much as lead. It's all just atoms. What's the scarcity? Your post-scarcity, boom, we're able to get out from under the mantle of oppressive, economic systems. Whether it's capitalism or whether it's fascism, whatever it is that denigrates the individual. We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity, Picard says. We no longer pursue material gain. Well, that's all well and good. And of course, that's a major turning point in Star Trek world to be able to survive that instinct to how did you survive killing each other on the planet, even for the first 100 years getting off planet. When your science is developed enough, when you've gone to the next peer up from atomic power, like we saw in the pilot of Strange New Worlds, there's just as much destructive power with a antimatter engine. Turn off the magnetic shielding on that antimatter and boom, just as much destructive power of threat weaponization as you had with the atom in the 20th century. But what are you doing with it? It takes a near wipeout of Earth, World War III, part of canon I don't like. I hope we can avoid. But you have to come to some kind of a cataclysm. The Vulcans did it as well. The Klingons apparently are doing it purely for survival. The Romulans, if you count the Romulans as having been the expats off of Vulcan in the beginning, and that schism, all the Cardassians apparently were resource poor and had a great republic and had a great spacefaring, but weren't up to the Bajoran's edge and things. I mean, you can go down through the backstory of all the Star Trek powers and do that. But this overarching, and then the Borg, of course, have no conscience. They have no soul. They have to be purely defeated on technical or limited, reined in, hosed down, diffused by purely technological means, because there is no reasoning with a Borg, obviously, when it's all purely about consumption and assimilation for survival. What we're saying here with this NASA study is long ago, the appeal of Star Trek in the 60s, the first generation of first fandom, was to a fandom that was soaked in Vietnam, soaked in the burgeoning civil rights movement, women's rights, the beginnings of the Green movement. Well, Rachel Carson was there in 64, but really the ecological movement, the first Earth Day was in 70. So that movement was just getting started to preserve the planet. Even if we didn't bomb ourselves with, man-made bombs, we could bomb ourselves with man-made chemicals or other stupid activities that poison the planet, and we died that way. So there's all kinds of way we can doom ourselves. And of course, Star Trek got to tell those metaphorical stories, and I'm sure you've got all your best ones. And they didn't end in the 60s. We had it come back with the 80s and the Berman era Trek. And the 90s were such a hopping decade for the most part. After it got going, it was easy to tell these tales of woe stories, right? About other planets. And, oh, look at ourselves. We've solved so much of these problems. Well, not. If we'd really looked at ourselves now, we were confusing material gain from the dot-com boom, not material gain versus all these spiritual and scientific. We were still polluting. We're still adding to the global warming. We've still got all kinds of issues we've got to deal with now, or maybe we're on this list. It's not a new idea. What I'm getting at is this 2022 paper from NASA scientists trying to explain why they think we have not yet met real intelligent spacefaring life yet, in some, even as a radio signal, much less, showing up in Bozeman. The great filter theory. You might have 100 civilizations that are where we are right now, but how many of them make the next big leap, get the next big threshold? Starting off the fact that the right atoms have to come together on the planet and evolve a life cycle within the ecosphere of that planet, whether it's oxygen breathing and carbon-based or silicon-based or whatever it is, as Discovery's starting to get into. However it evolves, at the point where they reach recorded history and some kind of communication language and can pass down knowledge from generation to generation, and we start adding up the building blocks, and then to the point where how do you get off burning natural resources? Where does technology come in and assist your life, not only to make it better, quality of life, but then if you are curious to get out of your own world, get out of your own land to the next valley, get out of your own planet to the next system. And that great filter theory has been used many times. On the reverse end of it, looking in the telescope from the other end, that is exactly why Gene would say the popularity of Star Trek was so defendable. In a time in the 60s and 70s, if you had quality science fiction, then likely as not, it tended to be dystopian and even post-apocalyptic. And those have their place. Look, Planet of the Apes told a strong tale. Fahrenheit 451. Margaret Atwood and Handmaid's Tale, right now. Well, in the last, televised now, but written years ago. The dystopias have their point. But at some point, if you are down about reality and you want to just get past all the message telling and get into the future, that's what Star Trek was always about. And then it had its detractors. When we put the hello message on the probes in the 70s in a fit of optimism, you had the detractors that said, why are we advertising where we are? Because if aliens are powerful enough to find us, they'll be more advanced than we are right now and we'll be fodder. And look, Bing, Independence Day is not a movie, it's reality. And Gene would argue on his own. Well, look what he said here to start off chapter 3, with Stephen Whitfield Poe. Intolerance in the 23rd century, talking about humans, improbable. If man survived that long, he would have had to have learned to take a delight in the essential differences between men and between cultures, humanity will say. He will learn that differences in ideas and attitudes are a delight. Part of life's exciting variety, not something to fear. It's a manifestation of the greatness that God, or whatever it is, gave us. The infinite variation and delight. This is part of the optimism we build into Star Trek. And remember, he wrote that He said that for Stephen's tape recorder. This was published at the end of season 2. It was not part of Star Trek canon, was not on screen, was not verbalized until early season 3. It was in his mind, apparently, just to throw a little Trek Files at you there. But from the standpoint, from the point of view of Earth, of humanity, we can't survive to do all the cool stargazing techie things and meet aliens. We can't survive unless we learn to make peace with ourselves and then hopefully bring that philosophy to who we meet. What this NASA paper is saying, and what Gene elaborated on later, was that goes for everybody else too. Whatever they're not going to be bumpy-headed forehead aliens, but whatever shape or form they take, there has to, as we saw demonstrated in the first contact in Discovery, no matter what the first initial communicated hurdles, in fact, even looking like enemies, like adversaries, getting beyond that to see the unintended consequences of their acts just as much as we've had unintended consequences on our own planet, even when we weren't beating each other up or killing in the name of this, that, and the other. Just the unintended pollution. Nobody intended to poison water. People just didn't think about it. I'm going to say, not until we get to bioweapons and things. So it's a concept that not just on the purely exploratory, but Gene defending the optimism of Star Trek, saying we should not fear others coming to see us, because if they are coming to see us, that means they have survived that what NASA's calling the Great Filter. Others have survived that limit too. If they have pushed beyond it, we really shouldn't have much to fear about. And then you say, well, Larry, what about the Klingons, the Romans, the Cardassians, the Borg? Well, okay, we got to have adversaries, but people also have motivations. And somewhere between the storytelling and the science, you don't want to have cardboard villains. You don't want to have 50s and 60s bug-eyed monsters. You don't want to have the unending terror and fear. The subtext is cautionary, but the play, Damnation Alley plays out like it's just a horror movie. It's McCoy walking into the dead hand over and over and over again, only bigger and more squeamish. I mean, that's all the tones of storytelling under the guise of science fiction you can do are there. But Gene, as the years went by, especially into the 70s and the 80s, would and as we got more realistic about alien contact, and as we sent out the Voyager probes and the Pioneer probes with the hello messages and plaques and greetings, people actually criticize that as giving our place away. Why are we giving up our hiding spot? Especially as vulnerable as we feel. We don't have space lasers yet. And Gene would say, without calling it the Great Filter, anybody who's making contact with us has survived. And of course, Gene would also say, especially in relation to the first movie, the human adventure is just beginning. It's not a tagline, it's an explanation. Also, in The Making of Trek, here on page 112, just this simple sentence. It's almost paraphrasing Ben Franklin. He says the message basic to the series is we must learn to live together, or most certainly we will all soon die together. That's pretty simple. But what he's also saying is that goes for everyone else who's out there. I mean, we talk about the Vulcans being cautionary and almost killing themselves before they reined it in. Expelled the Romulans. Oh, look, here they come. That's all evolved. May not have been intended intentionally. Klingons have had a backstory, didn't get one in the beginning, but they got one as time went on. Thank you, Ron Moore. Thank you, Nick Meyer and everybody associated with Star Trek VI for bringing resources into it and bringing a reasonableness to the Klingons for the first time, really. The subtext, the intention, and sometimes eventually stated on the nose premise of Star Trek is no, we're not dystopian. We're not looking for gloom and doom in the future, either with our own planet or as we contact others, because we believe in what NASA has so nicely buzzworded here as the Great Filter. I saw this headline. I thought, well, great on you, NASA. Thank you for validating Gene's basic philosophy in a world of people telling scary stories for the thrill of it. Thank you for validating what Gene and other philosophers began to put together in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Also, as a poo-poo against why we're doing all this SETI work, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, why we're doing so much SETI work and nothing ever comes of it. As our tech, as our ability to contact and probe further, even if it's just radio telescopes and other kinds of EM radiation contact, not indirect, not in direct proximity, but just remotely having contact, which is how, especially the novel contact, would postulate it happening at arm's distance, which galactic arm's distance, which would make some people feel better about the squeamish part about making contact with somebody who might outweigh us on the technology scale, and we'd be sitting ducks, vulnerable. If the contact is likely to happen at far edge, we might go for centuries, and that's all either one of us can do. We may not have a Bozeman moment for many centuries. We might be bringing it to others, unless we're checking for warp signatures first. But I just love, and I didn't see a lot about this. I didn't see a lot about this paper. My point of view was another one of the, well, yeah, why is this not a thing already? I thought it was a thing already. But maybe this is the weight of NASA weighing in to what some academics have talked about before. The term was already invented. I just love the way the basic premise of Star Trek, for the gee whiz geek factor, as well as the thoughtful galactic, sociological, psychological impact. Yes, Star Trek was great filtering all along. It's the premise of the show. Whether we're looking at it through our end of the lens, how do we make it and survive, and we do, or look at it from the other end of the equation, everybody else doing the same thing. It has to be heartening, and once again, it gets us right back to Star Trek and those who say Star Trek's not political. How do we make that happen? How do we embrace the future? How do we not stagnate and fear for the future? Well, some would say that's not political. I would say it's a broad brush of take that and bring it down to practical terms. What do you do on the ground every day, day in and day out of your life? What gets us to the Star Trek future? We take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Sometimes it feels like we take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Sometimes it feels like we took 3 steps back with nothing forward. But Star Trek doesn't have to have names and places and dates and political parties assigned to it, even within metaphor, to make the statement. That's what we always talk about, the subtext of Star Trek being political, is that guys, gals, peeps, work it out. The alternative is just too scary. It just thrilled people in the 60s to see a world that leaped ahead 300 years and had already done that. And we're facing their own problems on their own level. But it gave people hope to immediately get off our own world and hopefully bring what we'd learned, hopefully bring that wisdom, the wisdom behind, the prime directive, when it's really implemented, to bring that wisdom to the new plane, to the higher level of what galactic contact and government means. This is why I'd still love to have a Star Trek West Wing show. I'd still like to see Journey to Babel off and on and see the conflict that is allowed in Gene's world. They mostly get along, but people still have to work through issues and problems, as we saw in Journey to Babel and as we saw in Discovery with the debate over the contact of the 10C. Tale as old as time. Thank you, NASA, for getting it in the headlines, I think, and bringing it out to us. What do you think? What do you think? Did anybody else even see this story? Did anybody else even see that or connect it up to what I was trying to do? It's the secret of why Star Trek is not only popular, but why it works. Why Star Trek does not have to be a Pollyanna. If it wasn't a Pollyanna, real life science says this would all be a moot point. And that's why, take that, anti-canonista folks, and take that, all you doomsdayers. Yeah, we might well end it all here somehow, sadly. but it won't be from alien civilizations attacking us for the most part. Let's hope. What do you think? Let me know. If you're watching me later, this is the end of the show on YouTube. But you're welcome to come and join us live, because when we're live, everybody is chatting. All right. And I invite you watching us later on YouTube to come in and join us live on a Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. UK time, and 9 p.m. Central Europe. Because we are global. We are global here. We are global as seen in our TTLers. And just wanting to say, with the update list this month, thank you so much, Diana Hopkins, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, and Marie Siegel, Keith Rombach, Justin Porteous, Nathaniel Robinson, Andrew Jazimski, Panakasha Productions, Gay Clevin Lundstrom, and Glinda Bruton. Welcome, Glinda. And our live wires, of course, Halbert Gunn Johnson, Robert McLean, Alan Hoensi, J.R. Poole, Byron Bailey, Dave Gregory, and Casey Shafsky. Thanks so much, everybody. If you are wondering what the heck I'm talking about, you're helping support everything I'm doing here with Trekland, especially our streaming outreach, $5, $10 a month, patreon.com/Trekland Live for the mentioned shout out. And we're getting closer. We're almost ready to get the access to all those past interviews up for everybody. Just a quick reminder, too, if you're cruising next year out of LA on the official cruise, the day before or the day after, the Thursday before, the Saturday after, we're doing a special, simple but special LA Away Days, a Trekland Treks pre-planned version to 4 location sites for the classic. Well, 2 are classics, 2 are more obscure. Get with me, LarryNemecek.com. You can go check it out. Click down there. You can get all the information. It's for those who are coming in a few extra days into LA. You'll want to join that. If the cruise is not your thing and you're not around, maybe you'll be interested for the first time in 6 years. Since the 50th, Geek Nation Tours, my friend Terrace and I are offering the big 10-day tour of LA and San Francisco again, and with more celebrities involved, more of our Star Trek family involved with us, at least one a day. Actors, behind the scenes folks. It's the West Coast Away mission. Again, you can check that out. That's in July. You can check that out at LarryNemecek.com. Elsewhere around Trekland, yeah, there's a new Trek Files up. And we are staying with Hannah Louise Shearer, who wrote Pen Pals, who wrote several other stories, and who got caught up, like so many, in the chaos on the bridge. If you know the documentary, if you know the saga of the first 2 seasons, in the writer's room of The Next Generation, it's amazing the show made it at all. The writer's side was a little chaotic. Things settled down, thank goodness, by the time Michael Piller came in, and certain people were not allowed back in the writer's room who were not writers. Leonard Majlish, I'm looking at you. But you want to check it out at our Facebook page, The Trek Files. That's where the documents are, or wherever you can get the audio podcast, wherever fine podcasts are caught. Otherwise, gang, my socials. Hey, I'm at Larry Nemecek on Twitter, Larry's Trekland, where you are right now on Facebook. Also on YouTube, like and subscribe, please. Thank you very much. And Instagram as well, portal47.net. You can come in anytime. Again, the open house is coming up in December. Can't wait to announce that. Finally, for real. Yes. Guys, it's another Tuesday. So much is going on. The virus is hanging on out there. Not a week goes by that I don't hear from 1 or 2 more people I know who finally succumb. Thankfully, they are boosted and vaxxed. But, just please be smart out there and stay healthy. Do all the things. Stay woke. Check your sources. Somehow we survive. But you know what? There's so much mud in the air. Just be open to what you never had the chance to know before. And once you learn something new and shocking, check it out. Oh, guys. Trek well, everybody.